How y'all doing? Okay, okay. Y'all like food? Everything's good? All right, cool. Well, I'm not gonna be up here, forever, but we're gonna talk about some important stuff. My name is Jelani. I'm an associate professor. I work at the University of Louisville, so came down from Kentucky to be with y'all today. First of all, I appreciate that you all came. I appreciate the important work that you're doing, so give yourselves some love. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about stigma and the important work that, or a big reason why we're doing this work, okay? So, we brought some stats at y'all today. We got a few more. But if you look at this map, we see that HIV is a big problem in the United States. But where is it perhaps the biggest problem? Where region? The South. The South. Where do we live? The South. It's a problem, ain't it? I'm sure you've heard some statistics about Kentucky, but the South is the leading region of the country when it comes to HIV. All right. What community is affected by HIV the most? White community. It's not okay, there we go. We're just gonna do it like this. All right. So black people are affected by HIV more than other groups. So for example, 1 in 27, I think, black men are expected to be diagnosed with HIV, to acquire HIV, compared to 1 in 171 white men.
Wow. That number just
Numbers crazy. Okay?
Wow.
If we're talking about black men who have sex with men, it's closer to 1 out of 3. Okay. You look at black women. 1 in 75 black women are expected to acquire HIV, compared to 1 in 874 white women.
wow.
This is actually an improvement from a few years before, because it used to be 1 in 48. So we got challenges. This is why we're here. This is why we're doing the work. You know what though? When we look at the data, and this is some of the stuff that I study, we're not finding that black people are riskier than other folks. So black women use condoms more. Black folks get tested more than other folks. I told you the stat about black men who have sex with men. They actually have fewer risky sexual behaviors than white folks. So, what explains these numbers? Why are there differences? Well, if we can't really fully explain it by behavior, that's when we have to start looking at the social stuff, the social factors, the social determinants of health. That's when we have to start looking at things like poverty, people's access to health care. That's when we have to start looking at things like homelessness and racism, homophobia, transphobia, these type of things. The thing we're focusing on today is stigma. Why is stigma so important? Stigma undermines every public health approach that we try to use to address HIV. It's so important that we get people are diagnosed in a timely manner, that they are quickly linked to care, that they are retained in care, that they get the medications, and that people take the medications and that they're using them. And at that point, if we can do all that, they can get virally suppressed. Why is that important? You've probably heard it a few times today. U equals U. What does that mean? Right. Undetectable equals untransmissible. That's where we're trying to get people to go. Okay? But we can't do that because there's so much stigma around HIV. All right? It keeps people from getting tested. It keeps people from going to the doctor. It keeps people from taking the medication, taking the meds. Right? So I've known people who've had HIV since like the 90s. The problem with this disease isn't the disease. People are living for a long time. The problem is the stigma associated with it. So, what is stigma? What does this mean? Sometimes when I come in front of groups, I like to, break this down a little bit. Well, stigma it comes from a Greek word. The Greek word actually means like to tattoo, okay? It's a stain, it's a mark on somebody that discredits them socially. It's a characteristic about them that people look at and society looks at and people don't like. And we've all, in this room, we've all experienced some type of stigma. I see a whole lot of black folks, okay? We've been stigmatized in some way. I see some women in here. Y'all been stigmatized in some way. Black women in particular. And so it's something about a person that's deeply discrediting and reduces somebody from being a whole person to being more of a tainted person, okay? There are lots of types of stigma, but here's some examples of stigma around HIV. And these are all like real world examples. Avoiding contact with a person because they're living with HIV. Sometimes people are scared that if I'm around this person or if I have casual contact, they think they'll give me the virus. That's not how it works. You can't get it through casual contact. People throwing away utensils or refusing to use plates and not eating after somebody who has HIV. Okay. Sometimes, I know somebody, like when they would go over their family member's house, they wouldn't break out the real plates. They give them the paper plates, the stuff you can throw away. You can't get it that way. There's no reason to do that. Even when you go to the doctor, I work with people who are living with HIV. A lot of times, even when they go to the doctor, they're stigma.
That's surprising, right?
I mean,
A doctor who knows better?
Well, sometimes we think they know better, but they don't always.
I guess not.
They don't always. And sometimes it's not even the doctor. Sometimes it can be the nurse. Sometimes it can be the administrator.
Yeah.
Like people double gloving, putting on 2 gloves. You don't have to do that. I remember somebody was telling the story about how they were going to the doctor and the nurses was talking about them. Oh, that person has a house in Virginia. That means they have HIV. Why are you discussing somebody else's diagnosis? They're not giving them They're not giving them treatment. That ain't none of their business. That's an example of stigma. So when we're talking about HIV, there are different ways that stigma can manifest in different types of stigma. So there's the fear of being stigmatized. We call this anticipated stigma. This is the type of stigma that can keep somebody from getting tested. I think we've all been there. I've been there. Like, man, how are people gonna treat me if I take this test? And it comes back positive. What's gonna happen? How are people gonna treat me? That's called anticipated stigma. Then there are the perceptions of stigma in the community. How you think people will treat you. Okay? This is called enacted stigma. Being actively discriminated against because of somebody's HIV status. This goes back to the previous slide, things like, I was talking about the doctor and people disclosing status. And then there's something called internalized stigma, where you can adopt the negative attitudes or beliefs about your status, about yourself because of your status. Okay? Society says you're something, and you start to believe it. These are different types of stigma. Alright. So not gonna be talking forever, but let me talk a little bit about this slide. Then I think we got a video after this one. Okay. So the question is, why does HIV stigma exist? Well, there are a few reasons. A big reason is because sometimes we just don't know. We just don't have the knowledge, especially around the knowledge of transmission. Like I go out, I talk to young people, every other week about HIV. I'm teaching them. We still be amazed at how much people don't know. People still think you can get it through like casual contact, shaking hands, being around somebody. That's what helps accelerate the stigma. Because we don't know we don't know when you in or when you aren't in a position where it can be transmitted. In environments where you don't have access to treatment, or there's low access to treatment, there tends to be more stigma in those types of environments. When I was growing up, I was born in the 80s. I'm like an 80s, 90s baby, all right? And we were growing up, we saw the posters of like if somebody was living with HIV, they looked like they were wasting away. They looked sick. It looked bad. You know, it's not like that anymore. But I think that resonated with people, and people are scared because there's no cure. We can live for a long time, but there's still no cure. And finally, stigma tends to wrap itself around a lot of other existing prejudices around existing groups. So when we talk about HIV stigma, it doesn't exist in the vacuum. It usually dovetails a lot with racism, homophobia, transphobia, how we feel about people in poverty, how we feel about sex workers, drug users, all of these identities. They're all kind of mixed into the gumbo. Yeah, stigma is also very common. Yes, 8 in 10 people with HIV in the U.S. experience some type of stigma, experience HIV stigma. That's a lot. 80% of anybody of any condition experiencing something is a lot. So and then we got a problem, and again, that's why I'm happy y'all are here, because y'all are soldiers and helping address this. All right, so I got a video for y'all. A few years ago, we did this. We did interviews with people who were living with HIV, and we turned those interviews into monologues, into theatrical performances performed by actors. Right, the people we interviewed were like, all black. Everybody was 50 years old or older, and they but they let us use their stories and let these actors portray them. So let me see. Okay.
I met a guy, and he was probably like my first real true love. At 15, you are still a kid, so I wasn't aware. I didn't know anything about boys, men, or anything. He was dishonest with me, telling me that he was younger than he really was. And I was under the impression that he was 18, 19 years old. But in reality, he was about 27 years old. Yet we still dated, and I had sex with him, unprotected. But I never thought about anything like that. I had never even heard of HIV or AIDS. And he was a IV drug user, and I didn't know. You see, that was the thing. It was really new for me being sexually intimate with a man. That's how this thing all came about. I did notice that he would take frequent trips to the bathroom, but I didn't know why. I was more of a shelter kid, with my grandparents raising me. And I wasn't exposed to a lot of things going on with people in the world till I met this guy. Later on, his cousin realized we were a little friendlier than anybody knew, and she came into the room and said, "You have got to stop talking to that girl. She is just a child." And he was living with her then, and I'm sure she was thinking about the legal consequences that would happen if my grandparents found out we were seeing each other. But by that time, I had feelings for him. I was really starting to like him, But she didn't want any parts of that and stuff. So eventually we broke up. And then when I'm 19, I'm riding down the street and I run into him again and we exchanged numbers. And it's like we fell in love all over again. Because I had spent so much time thinking about if I'd ever see him. So when I did, I was just floored. And it's kind of like I'm reliving it right now talking to you. I was so happy. It was just so beautiful. And I was starting to pay attention to things and people in the world, and not like when I was 15, because I'm starting to really pay attention to him because I want to be in his life, you know? But he was still on IV drugs, and he shielded me from it, so I didn't know. The only reason I found out is because his cousin came into the room and told him that he left his stuff in the bathroom. So she came out of the room saying, "You left your stuff in my bathroom, and I got kids, and da-da-da. I told you not to do this stuff in my house." And then she came in and threw the stuff on the floor in front of us. And that's when I saw it all. The drugs, the needles, all that stuff he'd been doing. And I realized how he always seemed like a different person when he come out the bathroom, on account of him being high and happy and all. And he's what, in his 30s by then? And I still don't think he knew that he was positive, that he had HIV or AIDS. And it was all on the news. It was in the 80s, and everybody was just so afraid, like, God, if you get that, you're gonna die. And then I learned how it's transmitted through bodily fluids and blood and semen. But eventually we break up, and he starts seeing another girl, and she actually ends up having a child by him. But when the baby's born, they found out that the baby's HIV positive. Then she finds out she's HIV positive, and then he finds out he's HIV positive, and then he gets sick. And his cousin comes to find me and says, "I'm gonna tell you he's sick, and he's really bad off. They don't know if he's gonna make it." And I'm like, "What happened to him?" Then she sits me down and tells me he has AIDS. So then I rushed to the hospital, and God, I'll never forget the way he looked. He was just so sick looking. And then she sits me down again and says, "Midnight, you need to get tested." And I'm terrified because I'm about to graduate college, and I'm just like, none of this is real. Then she calls me again to tell me he's dead. Then I begin to think about him telling me how sorry he was and him apologizing that he never meant to hurt me. So I did the best thing I figured I should do. I just took all that stuff and just forgot about it. The drugs, the baby, his cousin, him getting sick, him having AIDS, him even dying. I just took all that and shoved it to the back of my head. I was in denial for 2 years before I actually went and got tested. And they told me I was positive. It was another 8 years of me living in denial before I got tested again. And again, they told me I was positive. And I didn't believe it. And sometimes I still don't, that it happened to me. You see, living with HIV and AIDS is challenging because of the stigmatization from others inside and outside of personal relationships. I really have a problem with it myself because people find it challenging to be around me because they don't know how they can get it without exchanging bodily fluids. And it won't be a secret much longer. I have family that know that I'm positive. I have 5 sisters, and they all know. They don't treat me different. They don't stigmatize me. But they also don't give me everything I need to fulfill me as a person. You see, I talked to my son and other young children about it, and I asked them, do you all use condoms? Do you all protect yourself? Because young girls are getting pregnant and catching STDs more than ever, and sometimes I have to tell them, why you out there having sex with multiple partners? Make sure you protect yourself because you can be affected. And they're like, we could get AIDS? That's just for old people and gay people. And I'm like, no, it's every people, it's everybody now. But I just try to keep a positive attitude. You know, I look forward to my son graduating high school, going to college, getting married, and having kids. I pray to live to see my grandchildren one day. And I believe that God listens to me. And I try to stay thankful and grateful because God kind of used this as a way of connecting me to Him, you see. And I know that He's big. God is bigger than this, and He can sustain me so I'll be here for my grandkids one day. So I try to think about the poems and songs that I've been writing throughout all of this. I even think about going back to college and finishing my bachelor's. You see, I've got plans to live and not die.